And Marie, you can go ahead.
Great. Welcome back, folks and friends. Thanks for joining us for the third session of day 5, Academic Technology. We are joined by Stephen Race and Dylan Tarnowski. I will read their bio. So Steve, who you may have the pleasure of knowing, is the manager of the SUNY Online Application Services, where he leads a team of administrators responsible for the day-to-day operations of the SUNY digital learning environment, a multi-tenant deployment of Brightspace by D2L. He works closely with campus LMS administrators across SUNY to solve problems, deliver effective solutions, and ensure campuses stay informed on the latest developments, all while fostering meaningful relationships that support long-term collaboration. A detail-oriented project manager, Steve is known for his collaborative approach, clear communication, and commitment to consistent, reliable digital learning experience across the system. So thank you, Steve, for joining us. Dylan Tarnowski is SUNY's strategic account manager at D2L. He has been with D2L for 3 years and has been serving SUNY since October of 2024 to help campuses find creative solutions to strategic challenges. He has a master's in international public policy from the Basili School of International Affairs in Waterloo, Ontario, Canada, and lives in neighboring Kitchener with his partner Kim and 2 sons. He is an unapologetic Toronto Blue Jays fan who is still not over Game 7. I'm so sorry, Dylan. And so I will turn it over to you guys.
Thanks, Marie. Hi everyone. Uh, Dylan and I are going to kind of split this. I'm going to start, and then uh, he's gonna close out. And I know the slide on the screen right now does not relate or say anything about pie items or the roadmap. We will get there. So the title of this presentation that I'm doing is Unlocking Brightspace's Potential at SUNY. And so I don't present a lot. And when I'm tasked with presenting, I always have the issue of like, what do I present on? Right. So I asked a couple of colleagues, I think Marie and maybe a few others, and I got pretty much the same response from everyone. And it was, well, we want to hear about what excites you about Brightspace. So what are you excited for about Brightspace? What excites you? So that's what I'm going to talk about today. And some of this might be older information, some of it might be newer information for you, but in general, it's what I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to really talk about 3 areas, and I'm really going to try to speed through these so we can leave some enough time for Dylan. But when I think about what excites me, I really think about 3 areas in Brightspace and 3 areas where from our implementation to now, we've had an impact with providing solutions to our campuses in our digital learning environment. So those areas are data, expanding functionality, which is kind of a bucket term that I'm using. And for those of you who know me, you know I really enjoy custom widgets. So I'm going to talk about those 3 things, and uh, hopefully you enjoy it. So the first topic is data. So early on in implementation with Brightspace, we started getting some questions about data, which is pretty common when you're working in an LMS. And we were, anything from like academic integrity questions to, hey, what tools are my faculty using, things like that. We were able to get answers for campuses, but the really took kind of a long time to get those questions answered. So what we ended up doing to really address that issue of data access for campus administrators was we entered into a data engagement project with D2L. And I want to stress that this wasn't just a quick project. It was a year-long engagement. D2L paired us with a really amazing person at their in their I don't want to say environment, but in their company. Um, his name is Michelle. He is from Brazil, and he would meet with us every couple of weeks, every twice a week, every week for over a year. And one of the things that we uh, took away from that engagement is really the ability to build reports in Brightspace, in the analytics builder, and serve the campus's needs with data. So um, through that engagement, we initially set out to recreate some things called advanced data sets in Brightspace in the analytics builder, and make them interactive so that campuses could go through and get the data that they need, anything from learner usage or grade statistics, things like that. But I do want to stress that the most valuable part of that for me, for my team that I oversee, is being able to create those things on our own without D2L, without the help of D2L at all. And so a long-term priority for us was to be able to take our tickets, our support tickets that we would get, again, mentioning things like academic integrity, usage, things like that, and give back those reports so that campus admins wouldn't even need to open a ticket with us and say, hey, I need X, Y, and Z. Hey, we have a report for that, right? So that was sort of the goal, to make these reports very self-serve, customize them in if they needed something changed, things like that. And like I said, at the bottom here, it says, this was really driven by campus requests, campus needs to our help desk. So since December of 2024, our engagement actually started in August of 2024, but since December of 2024, we've released about 30 plus self-serve interactive dashboards to campus administrators in our shared environment. I'm not going to read through this list, but this is like the breadth of the work that we've done over the past year plus with our learning engagement with D2L. Again, I won't go through all of these, but there's a lot here. So this is just an example, and I chose to show this example because it's like probably the most visually interesting dashboard. This is the adoption dashboard. It lets campuses see at a glance how their users are actually interacting with Brightspace. And these screenshots are a little old now, but I think you can get the idea. There's about six, we call these views. So there's about 6 views in the adoption dashboard that shows various metrics. And I have one more slide that shows that. So tool usage by role, comparison of tool usage, things like that. And these are all interactive and have really good information. You can filter by semester, filter by course, filter by department, things like that. So yeah, just an example of what we've been doing with data. So I do want to highlight how data requests previously worked and how they work now. So before, campus has a data question. That question comes to us usually through a ticket to our help desk or through an email to me, especially during implementation. Hey Steve, I need this information, and then more than likely we would request information from D2L, right? Because the data was there, we just didn't have a way to grab it in a way that made sense. Because all the data in Brightspace is stored kind of in tables in various, we call them data sets, and we connect those data sets to make sense of the data. But if you're just pulling data in and looking at it, just one table, you're not going to be able to make a lot of sense out of it. So D2L would always respond with that and say, here you go. And then we would relay that back to the campus, right? So that's 5 steps to get like an academic integrity report or something along those lines. Now we have an area that our campus administrators can navigate to. They only see their data when they go in. If they have that academic integrity report or they have a question about something, they can go and find that information. And those requests for new reports still do come to us for, if there's a very specific request that our current reports are not covering, we can still build that and serve that up in that same interface to the campus administrators, and they can consume it, do what they need to do with it. And then if that report ends up being more useful broadly, we can expand it so that all campuses in our shared environment can access it. I like to see feedback. I don't get a lot of feedback on data, but one of the challenges is like if you build it, they will come, and it's tough to see if they're actually using the reports that we build. But we did get a very, very nice quote from a anonymous campus administrator, and I'll just let this sit here for a second so you can read through it. And I think that it's just a testament to the really hard work that we've been doing in the data reporting area. And this is really what it's all about, right? Being able to provide those solutions for our campuses. All right, I'm going to hold that for like a beat, and then I'm going to move on to my next slide. All right, so wanted to talk a little bit about expanding functionality. So access to data was not the only challenge, right, in Brightspace when we were implementing. There were a few things that campus administrators were unable to do when we first implemented, and we took note of those things. And I want to point out a few things that we've expanded with the help of our D2L partnership in our platform. So the first one, early on, I'm sure there's a lot of people on this call right now who can remember all of the campus, all of the course merges that came through our ticketing system. And so we would merge tickets, merge courses manually with a very specific merge tool that doesn't really exist in the system anymore. Now we have the SIS merge tool. We were able to get early access to that tool because of our partnership with D2L, and campus administrators can now merge courses, right, in the UI, and that they don't have. That's something they don't have to go through us anymore to handle. The gradebook customization, that places the local campus ID right in the course gradebook, so that when faculty go to submit grades, they can see the local campus ID, and it's a little bit easier for them. A common example I use is if we have 2 students on the roster named John Smith, faculty may not know who that John Smith, which grade to enter for that John Smith. Now we have a value associated in the LMS with them that they'll be able to use as an identifier when they're submitting grades. And the last one is probably the biggest one, and I'll probably rest here for a moment. I certainly have a couple more slides about distributed administration, but so we work closely with D2L to improve the functionality for day-to-day campus administrator workflows, right? So, anything from just looking for a user and making sure that user, you can impersonate that user, to when you go into, like when your courses are created, they look like your courses instead of generic courses immediately. So I will talk about this for a moment. Just check time real quick. Okay. So yeah, with our distributed administration, we had 5 deliverables that we released with D2L, and that started back in August of 2024. I'm not going to read all these, but these represent all the areas that were impacted by the project that we had with D2L. So on the right-hand side, though, I do want to just highlight that there was a very structured process that we went through where D2L would deliver each deliverable to our staging environment. Myself and others on my team would go through a round of testing. We would then open that up to our campus administrator stakeholders for them to be able to test things, and then they would give feedback. And we would have that feedback loop with D2L if there were things that were caught and needed to be addressed. So here's where I'm excited. I think that this is probably, this is really why I'm including this in this presentation. So with co-development, it's all the things that I just showed you on the previous slide are now slowly coming to general availability, or GA, in the core product of D2L. So it's no longer, these things are no longer SUNY specific customizations, right? So they are bringing all these things that we worked on with them into their product. We're still engaged. So we still meet regularly with with the developers and the product manager who oversees distributed administration at D2L. And probably the most important to me is that distributed administration is now part of D2L's product roadmap. So it's actually like, if you go to the roadmap page, they have distributed administration listed there. And I feel like it's really because of the work that we did with D2L to sort of bring our needs and what we wanted to see from the LMS to the forefront to be able to be represented for the site, the multi-tenant environment. The larger site that has a lot of colleges inside of it may have different needs, or a smaller need for distributed administration. Maybe I just need to give my department admin a role or ability, right? So that is now represented. So that's exciting to me. All right, so my favorite thing in the world. So I love custom widgets. I don't think it's a secret. For those of you who don't know, widgets are sort of a blank canvas, if you will, that you can customize and place on a course homepage or on your campus homepage, on your site homepage. They are super versatile, and I will talk about them for a moment. So during implementation, I started hearing from our campuses, hey, we had this in our previous LMS, or hey, we had X, Y, and Z. How can I bring those things to the forefront? And so I have two things here. That one was sort of like very, very, I mean, they're both from implementation from a couple different campuses. For those of you who don't know, I'll talk about the one on the left-hand side really quickly, but for those of you who don't know, there are certain things in Brightspace that a faculty member can just restore. If they delete an announcement, an assignment, discussions, quiz, they can all restore those without having to ask for any help, right? So if they accidentally delete an assignment or discussion, they can actually go and restore that on their own. One of the things that is a little, and sorry, Dylan's a little frustrating, is that some of those options are buried deep, deep, deep. So it's really tough to remember where those things are. So with a widget, early on, I was able to, work, and this is something that some campuses have, but basically making something like a restore content widget, right? And that's a little bit of a misnomer because it's not content, but it's but it's a restoration widget. And so what it does is, if I were to click on restore deleted assignments, for example, it would take you right to the area in the course where you can restore those assignments, right? So you don't have to remember the 4 or 5 clicks to get into that space. You just click it and it's there. So building efficiencies like that is really one of the things that I'm all about. So that's one of them. The other one on the right-hand side is an RSS feed widget. In the previous LMS that this campus was on, they had on their homepage, they were using the LMS's default RSS feed. Uh, and there's basically a module that would bring in an RSS feed. So this is right on the homepage for this campus, and I was able to kind of help them with that and get that going. And it's just two examples of kind of like the things that um, I enjoy doing, and to sort of put those solutions out there for the campuses. And the text down here basically, the one thing I always keep in mind is screen real estate, right? So when you're building a widget, you only have so much, right? So you don't want to clutter it. So you want to make sure that whatever you're putting there is actually of value and will be used. So in the same vein as uh, custom widgets, one of the things that I'm most proud of is something called the Campus Administrator Toolbox. And it's something that's like super popular with a lot of our campus administrators. I hope that everyone uses it, but if they don't, that's fine. So it's a Brightspace course, and every single campus has their own version of it. I was able to make the widgets inside of it. Basically, it's just one widget, is all it is. For each of these widgets here on the left-hand side, these are the sort of 6 widgets that we have, but there's some widgets that are interactive depending on which campus you're coming from, it will send you to certain resources, right? So for example, when Marie from Purchase clicks on the the courses tool, it's the courses tool for SUNY Purchase. And when Ron from Alfred clicks on it, it is the courses tool from Alfred. It's one widget that's built at the top level of the site and shared down, but it's coded in such a way that it recognizes the role that the person has and it puts them in the correct spaces. So this is really meant to be a one-stop shop for our campus administrator community. And it was really born out of a couple of campus visits that we did early on. So SUNY Online, we come and visit your campus and kind of meet with you, eat your food for the day. And one of the pieces of feedback that we had received is, we have these abilities, we have all of these things that we have access to. I don't know where to go when I can't find the link to do something, right? So that was sort of like, a light bulb kind of went off in my head. Like, why don't we consolidate all these tools into one space and keep it updated and add new stuff to it as time goes on? So with that, I have a couple more slides and then I'll pass it over to Dylan. I want to do a little bit of a problem solving exercise with widgets. So this is the default instructor profile widget for Brightspace. It's a great widget. It does what it needs to do if the instructor fills it out. So here's the feedback that we've received on why why campuses don't use that widget, or maybe things that they wish it did. So it's underutilized. Sometimes it's missing information. The instructor leaves it blank, or maybe it's just a face-to-face course and the instructor doesn't use it. The data doesn't copy over from course to course. And so if I fill that out and then I copy my course for the next semester, it's frustrating because it's not there, right? The information from the previous semester, I have to fill it out. If I'm teaching 4 sections, I have to fill out each time. And then the last one is it's single user representation only. So that's sort of like what I'm trying to solve here and what I'm about to show you. So problem number 1. So I made a widget. It's a work in progress. And it's an instructor profile widget that will always load content that's stored at the campus level. So that means that if the instructor doesn't fill anything out, it still has some useful information in it that will help students or can help students. It can be branded to the campus, change colors, things like that, right? Second problem, the data doesn't copy from course to course, right? So this widget reads a couple of small files that are stored in the managed files area on the course level. And what that means is when you go to copy the course from term to term, those files copy with the course, right? And will load in the next course. Also, it's easy to update. I don't have a screenshot of it here, but there's a tooltip that shows up down here for people in the instructor role. And finally, there's multi-profile support for this. So if you have more than one instructor, you can add files to your managed files area, and it will change, the interface will change so that it can recognize, who's on the roster. And so you'll see here, I have a teaching assistant, right? So you put a teaching assistant file and photo in there. And if they don't upload a photo, it will fall back to, the photo will fall back to this image is stored at the campus level. And this text here is stored at the campus level. So, with that, like I said, it's a work in progress. I'm really excited about that, but that is my portion of this presentation. I do want to be clear, the work that we're not done with anything that I mentioned. We're still working on data. We're still working with D2L on a lot of those expanded functionalities. But I wanted to highlight those things because those are the things that make me excited about working in the platform and working with all of the campus administrators. And to segue a little bit into Dylan's portion, there are some times when we just can't solve things on our own, and we need to open up a pie item, which is a product idea exchange. And so I will hand that off to Dylan now so he can talk about pie and all that fun stuff. Thanks.
Are you going to share? Are you going to continue sharing, or I should share my own slides?
Do you want? I can open up your deck if you want and share, or if you want to.
As long as I have permission to share, that's fine.
Dylan, just check your mic input. It sounds like we're getting audio from the computer and not from your.
Yeah, it sounds different than it did earlier.
How about trying that? Better or worse?
It's the same. Can maybe check in your Zoom audio input options.
How about now?
That's better.
How these things happen? I don't know. Strange. Here we go. Let me share my PowerPoint. Sorry about that. One more time. All right. The stuff you desire to know. That works? See that?
Yes.
Great. Great. So four things here that we will review today with the balance of time. The community and high impact changes, product idea exchange, how it works, and what the output of Pi yields in the end, which is our roadmap, and then how it marries in with the release notes that you folks will see as well. So high impact changes and the community release notes here are things that you folks will be exposed to monthly here, and they refer to the technical documentation that is distributed to all of our customers alongside the launch of a system update, right? These are recent changes, feature enhancements, bug fixes, all of that. The documentation will describe very new product details or the details about changes included in the updates forthcoming here. Some months, there are many changes here, and it's a very long list. Others, it's shorter. It is flexible, and it scales depending on what's on the docket, and if there are any other high-impact changes or hot fixes that are required that need to be communicated right away by D2L to everyone on its list. you can go back and see other release notes behind in 23 and view all in 24 and so on. So if there's something you missed, you can always refer to that in the future there. High impact changes, and that talent here, you'll see this here right below release notes, known and fixed issues, and right there. These are upcoming disruptive changes, including changes in default behavior and removal of functionality that we are moving forward very quickly. The version changes you can see here below, 20.2311, that's the year 2023, the 11th month of that year, November, and then the day, the 11th there. You can see here it's structured so that we can provide visibility to everybody about what that tool is, the changes made to it, and the known feature updates that are coming and when that is, right? So for this feature here, as part of the example, we're letting folks know, that it will be end of life, right? These things are put forward here. It's high impact. You should be keeping your eye out for those things because they will matter to your environment. Historical changes, we want to also note there that those features that become a default in setting have been removed. So we want to make sure that you know also and are aware of what those implications would be. When you have release notes, what's coming up, what's being fixed, it's continuous improvement. It's ongoing. We're always thinking about these things. And that's why there are no downtimes. You have to wait. You have to see an update. We're always moving and improving as the months go on here. The Product ID Exchange is a place where educators, if they're academic or staff, administrators, can submit new feature requests to us, as well as promote, support other ideas and comment on existing feature requests from other users that you think these would be great. I had a similar thought while I was in the shower. Let me heart that instead of giving submitting another one in just a little bit different language here. This is kind of capture what I'm looking for. And you can promote these and be within the community to see the Product ID Exchange and the submissions moving forward. Note, you'll need your community login, if you haven't already done that, to access the Product ID Exchange in there. So how does Pi work? Ideas flow from Pi to our product team. It is also informed by a number of other avenues as well. This includes design studies that are done, advisory boards and committees that exist, customer interaction. When Jamie Ferrazano, Andrea Paliak, your solutions engineer, myself, when Steve and Kim and Dan and others, Harry, are on site with you folks, and we talk with you, understand what's going on, how you're feeling, challenges, those interactions there, we also take that back and record that internally as well. That goes into customer interaction, and that feeds into prioritizations of items within the roadmap. When we're at conferences and we hear things from others, presentations and thoughts from the community here, and then, of course, the account management team, right? Jamie, myself, one-on-one, other areas, your emails, we record that, and we submit that forward, and all those things combined go into that roadmap development. New ideas, when they're submitted through Pi here, are evaluated with work being done in present, today, and thoughts for future state. It might not be something immediately on the go, but there's been this thought for a while about a feature or request later on, and your support there through Pi, through upvoting and commenting, lends itself a little bit more gas, if you will, onto the fire, right? It gets it a little bit more support around that, and others start thinking about how can this work or fit within the future vision of Brightspace. The product team is alerted of trending Pi items. They watch the Product ID Exchange. They interact with folks that are making comments and upvoting items here because they are interested right now to understand what's hot, what is urgent, how can we get these things that are being requested here, good ideas to market and into Brightspace as quickly as possible. So what makes a good pie besides pumpkin and chocolate? When you're submitting your item and you're thinking about, I have an idea. I want to put this in here. Here's some guidelines for you to think about putting. These are the ingredients you want to be thinking about putting into your pie, right? These are things that are unique, right? Those are the ideas that you have when you are in the shower thinking of this. You're out for a walk and it kind of dawns on you. That idea and its uniqueness, let's try and make it as concise as possible. Distill it down to the fundamentals here of what you're looking for and the vision for it. That lends itself to that business case, right? This is why I think this is a good idea and its usefulness to others. You want to take that idea and not just leave it there like a post on showing my age, the Facebook wall. Just don't put it there, but you want to share that, right? You want to talk to your colleagues if you are a part of a committee or you are around a staff meeting and you kind of raise this there. That's a good idea. I'm going to put that in pie. And then when that's done, you share that with others, right? So that they can comment, share it themselves, have a little bit of a groundswell to what you're doing to get it a little bit further than just putting it up on the wall and then walking away from it. This is where partnership with D2L really matters as well. Not only to share internally with you folks, share it with Harry. When you see Steve on the street, if you do, pull him aside and say, I got this thing, you really should check it out, right? How can I talk to D2L about this thing? Can you tell them in your next account meeting? Raise it with us and think about ways in which your idea here can really be as a true partnership with D2L. How together are we going to be improving Brightspace and advancing good ideas for everybody? And lastly, it's the hardest thing to do, but be patient and persistent, right? Patience is many ideas need to be evaluated and seen and put up against priorities and investment from D2L here. Persistence means you got a good idea, be a little bit of a dog with a bone with it. You're going to keep pushing that, keep sharing that and raising that because the squeaky wheel gets the grease. We can hear these things and we can support that as well. What you shouldn't be, and it's pretty simple, is vague, right? That will require extra digging, extra thought, clarifications. That really kind of lowers the priority of things that are clear and concise and have explicit value stated outright that our product team and others can kind of latch onto and run with because it's easier to kind of pick that up because the ball feels like it's already started rolling in that direction. SUNY's been active in pie requests. We've seen 26 pie items from SUNY institutions submitted in 2025 of last year. Of those 26, 25 of them are currently under review. One item was closed as the capability existed. I hope that was a good thing. I have an idea. Oh, don't worry, it's coming. Great. Or did you know, just go here. Wonderful. I'll go. Since using Brightspace, SUNY has submitted a total of 148 pie items. It's great activity. 28 of those were either not planned to move forward, they're closed, or they're duplicates. They're good ideas, and others have had those ideas as well. So it just gets put into the idea that was submitted first, right? In total, 118 were under review. And since then, 2 were released. Not bad. You might think 2, that's it. But 2 can have a lot of impact across all of our clients. Remember, these are not just ideas specific to SUNY in your own environment, in your for your community, for your college, or specific institution or department. This is every single client. So one pie idea can touch millions of learners. It's pretty impactful when you think about it. Our roadmap, when we build this, again, all these other things go into it here. The inflows, already spoken about that. And we have a 90-day roadmap. It's published in the community. So you can see 90 days out what's coming. The roadmap is updated every 6 months. And I think as many of you know, we are proud to stand behind what the things that we put on our roadmap have a 90% time to completion of when we're going to say it's completed. So if it shows up on the roadmap, an idea that we have or a pie item that gets uploaded there, you can feel proud and you can feel kind of assured and confident that what we say we're going to do will be delivered with a 90% confidence by the time we say it's going to be done. We want to make sure that you feel like the things that are put into the universe are actionable, executable, and will have impact for everybody using Brightspace today, not just yourselves and other educators, but our learners that we serve every single day, every single semester. Roadmap lingo, shortly here, you should know GA means general availability, LA, limited availability, and restricted beta, select availability. Simple. So you can also understand when is this coming, GA, that's the thing you really want to watch for. As stated, the roadmap results, pie items do become items on the roadmap, and we say it explicitly here. Here's one planned for either this month, Feb, March, April, the first quarter of our year. Should also be noted that the quarters follow D2L's fiscal year, which begins on February 1 and runs through January 31st of the next year. So Q1 would be February, March, April. Here, says straight up there, this was a pie idea, and this is now getting put forward here so everybody can understand and see the impact of submitting something, the process, and the end result. It's not just buried or we tell you on the side. We want to make this announced and celebrated that this came from our community of users. I'll stop my share here if I haven't done so already. And just go to my screen. So the roadmap has been given a little bit of a facelift from last year. This is how the new roadmap looks, and you can scroll and explore. This is Christian Pantel. He's our Chief Product Officer, hailing from Winnipeg, Manitoba, where I went to school. Below, you can select each product, right? You're curious, what do you think? What are the new things looking like in Brightspace here? Takes you right there. Of course, this is that first idea that I just had up in my slide. Source courses, easier tracking for reoffered courses here. This will be released between February and April, and this came from the community. And here's an image of that and beyond. Another, a third, and some other things that we are hearing. It might not be from the pie, but it might be known. These might be ideas that we've had for a while in conversations with clients, from conferences or other sources. These get onto the roadmap and they're put forward here as well. As you go through each item within the roadmap here, I would ask that you work closely with Steve and Dan, Harry in the SUNY system office to advocate for yourselves, to take a look at these roadmap items and ask those questions. Which of these things can we anticipate within our environment? There are things that you like, that you want to see, you want to know more of. Work with that team to understand the timeline for you folks as well within the DLE. And they can communicate that over to us, and we can be collaborative to ensure that changes to your Brightspace environment are done thoughtfully and that fit your use cases and work for the environment that we built for you folks in a strong partnership. Just to say, you were the first ones in this type of a model here. And it's an accomplishment that we're all very proud of at D2L. And it's a partnership that we talk about often and a lot. And we're happy to have this type of exchange, meeting with campuses and regular meeting with SUNY system administration to ensure that you folks have the information you need from our release notes. You can understand clearly when things will happen, that that pie and the community, that you have robust representation there, and that you are equipped with strategies and tools to advance ideas, not only for SUNY, but for the entire Brightspace community.
Thank you, Dylan and Steve. If anyone wants to come off mute, ask questions of Dylan and or Steve, please feel free to do so. The chat has lots of pie conversation, of various flavors, so that's
That's great. Go upvote my pie items. Yes. See, Steve's doing it already. Go here. You should just put the links right there. Great.
So not seeing anything new in the chat. I don't know if Jamie had any comments, questions.
No, I didn't. I think that people were pretty complimentary of the widgets that Steve has developed and the of course place where people can go get all the information all at once. And I know that people are very appreciative of the pie option on the Brightspace website. I do want to mention you do need to be logged in as a community member in order to upvote and post pie items. So make sure if you don't have an account, you do so as well. I know, Dylan, you mentioned that, but it is something to reiterate.
Yeah. And it should just be your Brightspace login credentials. You should need another set or another password or username. It should be the exact same.
Awesome. Thanks. So for those of you who aren't in the DLE or for listening from outside of SUNY, just be aware. Look, Matt shared Steve's pie item. Nice, Matt. Good work.
I can always count on you. Thank you.